somebody actively consolidating control over his entire country, and this is the interview he wants to do. This is nothing but him using Viktor Orban to do a crash course on fascism to his audience.
Pro-NATO.
Also, somebody brought this up. Why is Tucker not wearing socks? Look at his shoes. Why is he not wearing socks? Oh, also, somebody brought it up in chat. It is a good thing to mention. Tucker Carlson really cares about anti-Semitism. He really cares. But he's not going to bring up Viktor Orban's history with anti-Semitism. What about the attacks against billionaire Jewish philanthropist George Soros? If you don't know about this, and this is something that made Viktor Orban the darling of the far right, is that Viktor Orban has constantly and consistently brought up George Soros. And his argument is that George Soros is working with a cabal to undermine his government. Do any of us recognize that rhetoric and what's going on there? That George Soros, in particular, only brought up by certain individuals, is trying to undermine his government. In the 2017 parliamentary election, Orban promoted anti-Semitic imagery of powerful Jewish financiers scheming to control the world. Thousands of posters of grinning Soros slogans with "Let's not allow Soros to have the last laugh" were posted around the countries on billboards, on the metro, and on the floors of Budapest's trams. Just this year, a new media campaign featured Soros and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker with the caption, "You also have the right to know what Brussels is preparing for." You guys are familiar with Tucker Carlson, right? Tucker Carlson, everyone's favorite respectable reporter. Real respectable fella. Smart fella. Big brain in that skull of his. He decided, for whatever reason, to interview the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. And for those who do not know who Viktor Orban is, he's an extremely far-right Prime Minister of the nation of Hungary, who's extremely authoritarian, extremely anti-LGBT, and is continuing to tighten his hold on the country. He's tightened his hold on the legislature, he's tightened his hold on freedom of speech and the press, and recently, his party pushed through legislation to ban gay propaganda. Whatever that is. That is the person that Tucker Carlson is giving a platform to. That is the person that Tucker Carlson will not oppose while talking to him, and instead just give him a platform to unopposedly spread his nonsense. That is the person that he was found taking friendly pictures with before and after the interview. I want to thank Balruk for the 5 gifted tier 1s. And he has decided to interview the man. So I wanted to check out this interview and how exactly it went, considering he is speaking to somebody who advocated to put migrants in shipping containers.
Welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Of the nearly 200 different countries on the face of the earth, precisely one of them has an elected leader who publicly identifies as a Western-style conservative. His name is Viktor Orban. He's the Prime Minister of Hungary. Hungary is a small country in the middle of Central Europe. It has no navy. It has no nuclear weapons. Its GDP is smaller than New York State.
Let me be clear, by the way. Viktor Orban has been listed by Reporters Without Borders as a press freedom predator. This is a guy who's just a blatant authoritarian.
So you wouldn't think leaders in Washington would pay a lot of attention to Hungary, but they do, obsessively. By rejecting the tenets of neoliberalism, Viktor Orban has personally offended them and enraged them. What does Viktor Orban believe? Just a few years ago, his views would have seemed moderate and conventional. He thinks families are more important than banks. He believes countries need borders. For saying these things out loud, Orban has been vilified. Left-wing NGOs have denounced him as a fascist, a destroyer of democracy. Last fall,
they lambast him that way because he attacks freedom of the press. because he goes after the LGBTQ plus community. Because he has been exceptionally cruel towards migrants. It is not just some random thing because they're like, oh, he didn't accept the new neoliberal trade deal, so now they all hate him. It's because he's legitimately an authoritarian.
Joe Biden suggested he's a totalitarian dictator. Official Washington despises Viktor Orban so thoroughly that many, including neocons in and around the State Department, are backing the open anti-Semites who are running against him in next April's elections in Hungary. We've watched all of this from...
I find it very interesting that Tucker Carlson cares about the anti-Semites who are running against Viktor Orban, but does not care about the open bigot Viktor Orban himself and how he has talked about migrants, how he has talked about Islam, how he has talked about gay people and the laws he's passed around them, banning gay propaganda. Very, very concerning that now he cares about bigotry. And he's propping up Viktor Orban as an opponent of bigotry.
In the United States, and we've wondered if what we've heard could be true. So this week we came to Hungary to see for ourselves. We sat down with Orban for a couple of long conversations, including one this morning. In a moment we'll show you some of that and you can make up your own mind about it. But first, a word about Hungary. Even if you understand that the American news media lie...
To be clear, Viktor Orban did hold migrants in literal shipping containers, and then said that migrants are a Trojan horse for terrorism. And that type of rhetoric led to many migrants being turned away from the war-torn countries they were fleeing and put them in an even more precarious situation. Viktor Orban is the worst Europe has to offer.
It is always bewildering to see the extent of their dishonesty. Nothing prepares you for it. We've read many times how repressive Hungary is. Freedom House, an NGO in Washington that's funded almost exclusively by the U.S. government, describes Hungary as much less free than South Africa.
By the way, it's not just Freedom House. It's basically every single respectable NGO. Like I just talked about, how Reporters Without Borders listed him as a press freedom predator. It's anybody with two brain cells.
Fewer civil liberties. That's not just wrong, it's insane. In fact, if you live in the United States, it is bitter to see the contrast between, say, Budapest and New York City. Let's say you lived in a big American city and you decided to loudly and publicly attack Joe Biden's policies, his policies on immigration or COVID or transgender athletes. If you kept talking like that, you would likely be silenced by Joe Biden's allies in Silicon Valley. If you kept it up, you might very well have to hire armed bodyguards. That's common in the U.S. Ask around. But it's unknown in Hungary.
Okay, can we just, like, he's going on this rant right now, but can I just be very clear about Viktor Orban, like, and how much of a scumbag this guy is? Okay, let me just read a little bit, just a little bit, from an article from Vox talking about Viktor Orban and how he's dismantled slowly the country's democracy, becoming a strong man. At dawn on Tuesday in May, the police took a man named Andras from his home in northeastern Hungary. His alleged crime? Writing a Facebook post that called the country's prime minister, Viktor Orban, a dictator. He has a point. After winning the 2010 election, the prime minister has systematically dismantled the country's democracy, undermining the basic fairness of the elections, packing the courts with cronies, and taking control of more than 90% of the country's media outlets. He has openly described his form of government as illiberal democracy, half of which is accurate. Since the coronavirus, Orban's authoritarian tendencies have only grown more pronounced. His allies in parliament passed a new law giving them the power to rule by decree and created a new crime, spreading a falsehood, punished by up to 5 years in prison. Tucker Carlson, the free speech warrior who doesn't want Donald Trump to be banned from Twitter, doesn't want somebody to be banned from Facebook. But if you spread a falsehood in his favorite Hungary, 5 years in prison. That's a little different than getting banned from Twitter. The government recently seized public funding that opposing political parties depend on. Through an ally, they took financial control of one of the few remaining anti-Orban media outlets. In May, the pro-democracy group Freedom House officially announced that it is no longer considering Hungary a democracy. Usually, if somebody can rule by decree, and then if you spread falsehoods about them, like calling him a dictator, you can get 5 years in prison, and you're seizing the funding of your political opponents, and you're seizing 90% of the country's media outlets, coming out and saying, this person that Reporters Without Borders lists as a press freedom predator might not be the person I want to highlight as a defender of Western values. Andras was detained for hours for daring to criticize the authoritarian drift. The 94-year-old was ultimately released, but the police official statement on the arrest noted that a malicious or ill-considered share on the internet could constitute a crime. He got the message. I told the cop their tax has achieved its result and would probably shut me up, he told the news site. Look, I'll just post this whole article, but this guy is a homophobic bigot who is slowly creeching his hand over the entirety of the country and strangling it. Oh, 64, not 64. Yeah, it's 64, not 94. There's the link in chat. You guys can check out the article for yourself. I didn't even talk about the gay propaganda law that his party pushed through recently. All I need you guys to know is the character of the man this guy is. That this guy is getting interviewed by Tucker Carlson. I remember when I was working in Model UN and I went to DC for the big conference, and my job was to represent Hungary on migrants. And the entirety of the time, all I did was manipulate statistics and spread fear, so I could, when we did actually pass stuff at the Model UN, it would basically make sure that I wouldn't have to take a single migrant. That was me representing Hungary at Model UN on the national stage. It was basically just me spreading fear about migrants, because that's what the representative of Hungary would do in this situation. Dude's not a cool guy. While studying him for that conference, I had to learn a lot about him. Outside of Alexander Lukashenko, this is the closest you can get to a dictator in Europe currently.
Opposition figures here don't worry that they will be hurt for their opinions. Neither, by the way, does the prime minister. Orban regularly drives himself with no security. So who?
By the way, he says that Orban wouldn't be hurt by people's opinions, but we just read a story about somebody being dragged out of their home for calling him a dictator. Tucker Carlson is saying that Orban isn't hurt by people's words, but he literally has the cops go to people's homes and drag them away if they call him a dictator. Totally not a dictator, buddy.
Who's freer? In what country are you more likely to lose your job for disagreeing with the ruling class's orthodoxy?
There's a difference between you saying something on Facebook that's racist and losing your job, and you saying something that disagrees with the government and you going to prison for 5 years. There's a difference there between someone getting banned on Twitter and somebody going to prison for 5 years.
Salakin $5. These criticisms against Orban's policies on migrants and freedoms is similar to most of Eastern Europe, and it's objectively true that Germany and France have struggled in their integration policies. These issues don't convince people like Tucker, sadly.
Well, of course, we're not going to convince Tucker to care about migrants, but I think people who don't know about Viktor Orban should know that his government put migrants in shipping containers on the border with armed guards. They should know that he's passed anti-gay propaganda laws, whatever the hell that means. Basically, it stops gay people from being represented in children's media. There's no queers allowed in children's media. You need to show them traditional families. Because if a child is exposed to the fact that gay people exist, they'll become gay. And of course, the law is now making it so he could rule by decree, as a dictator would, control 90% of the country's media outlets, take away the funding for your political opponents, and arrest those who call you a dictator for spreading false years up to 5 years. If I was to say that Biden did any of this, Tucker Carlson would make a documentary about it. Viktor Orban did all of this, and Tucker Carlson is fawning over him because he's a far-right nationalist.
The answer is pretty obvious, though if you're an American, it is painful to admit it, as we have discovered. With that, here's Viktor Orban. His accent's pretty thick, but his English is precise. He's worth hearing. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. So in 2015, hundreds of thousands of migrants appear on your southern border. They appear all over Europe. They stream into Germany. The rest of the EU says, welcome, please come. We can handle it. We're strong enough. Hungary stands alone in saying no. Why? Why did you take a different position on migration from other European countries?
That was the only reasonable behavior. If somebody, without getting any permission on behalf of the Hungarian state, cross your border, you have to defend your country and to say, guys, stop. And if you...
When he says defend your country, what do you mean? Defend them from what? What are the migrants going to do? Are they going to overthrow the country? Are they going to overthrow the country with their tired bones that just had to walk however so far to get to your country? With their firearms that they don't have? They just fled a war zone. They're not exactly in overthrow government position.
You would like to cross or you would like to come, there's a legal procedure, we have to do it. But you can't cross, without any kind of limitation and permission and any contribution and control of the Hungarian state. It's dangerous. You have to defend your people.
How is it dangerous? He says it's a Trojan horse from terrorism. Prove it. Prove it statistically. Like, I would like to see that being proved. That statistically, taking these migrants in is going to spread terrorism and lead to a lawless state. I'd like to see that. Because that hasn't happened. Germany is fine. It really is. People will try to pretend that it's in chaos. And Germany took way more migrants than most people would. Or that was ever asked of Hungary. It's fine. It still exists. It's still breathing. It's still going. So what exactly are these migrants going to do?
People against any danger.
And you think you have a right to do that?
Of course. It's coming from the God, the nature, so all arguments with us.
Okay, so the reason he can do it is God. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. God told you. Well, then God told me you should take them in. Wonderful. We're back to square zero.
Because this is our country, this is our population, this is our history, this is our language, so we have to do that. Of course, if you are in trouble and there is nobody closer to you than the Hungarians, you have to be helpful. But you can't say simply that, okay, it's a nice country, I would like to come here and to live here because it's a nicer life. This is not a human right to come here.
Let me just be clear,
way.
by the way. Hungary agreed, while being part of the European Union, to abide by EU laws. It makes sense. If you agree to be part of an economic trade union, that you would agree to abide by that economic trade union's laws and regulations. And Tucker Carlson is a law and order commentator. Hey, Viktor Orban has made his whole career of being a law and order big, strong man. Yet, his policy on migrants and refugees is violating EU law. And the European Court of Justice ruled that Hungary's deportation of refugees to Serbia was unlawful. But instead of being like, oh, I guess since we broke the law, we need to right this wrong and take the refugees back in, he just ignored them. And he didn't even stop. He kept doing it. Remember when I criticized the Chinese government for just ignoring the decision by an international court that they are violating international law with their claims and movements in the South China Sea, and that they're completely not in the legal right when it comes to the Scarborough Shoal in the Philippines, and I criticized them, and they just ignored the decision, just kept doing it? This is the same thing. This is just like what China did. Hungary was breaking EU law. The EU court comes in and says, you are breaking European Union law. Viktor Orban says, I do not care. I'm just going to ignore you. And then he continues to violate that law. If Hungary cannot follow EU law, then why is he in the European Union? How is Hungary and Viktor Orban going to take all the benefits of this economic trade union?
Salakin $5. Did taking in migrants create chaos? No, but it's a fact that in 201,517 there were many instances of migrant crime and terror attacks were tied to the influx of migrants. Notably New Year's Cologne and the Bastille attacks.
Okay. Number one, that's not a year. I assume you mean from 2015 to 2017. Number two, anybody can cherry pick examples. I'm talking about a statistical rise that they are doing. If this is the policy we're going by, that we can just cherry pick examples from anything to say, look, there is this person who was of this group that did a bad thing, then you're basically pulling a Tariq Nasheed. Remember in Tariq Nasheed's documentary yesterday, where his examples of how the gay community was evil was just naming random gay people that were mean and did bad things? You got to show it that there's a statistical tie there. You have to show it that bringing in these migrants is going to be a significant national security threat if you're going to put millions of people at risk by not taking them in. Okay. I forget the point I was making now, but basically Viktor Orban is not following the laws of the EU while getting all of the benefits of being part of the trade bloc. If everybody else has to follow the rules, so does Hungary.
Because it's our land. It's a nation, it's a community, families, history, tradition, language.
Saying what you just said, which I think will seem obvious to a lot of our viewers, was very offensive to a lot of countries in Western Europe, to their leaders.
Yeah, because
he violated the law. He broke the law that everybody else had to do. Everybody else carried his weight, and then Viktor Orban said, nah, we're just going to be lazy and not follow the rules. But also, please, give me the EU checks. Give me the EU money. Give me the EU trade. We just don't want to follow the rules. Rules for thee, but not for me.
Many European countries decided to open a new chapter of their own history of the nation. They call it New Society, which is a post-Christian, post-national society.
Shockmaster $987.5. What do you think about me doing an Undertale run with Bernie as pacifist run and Trump as genocide run stream?
Gonna be honest, that sounds like some nerd shit. I don't know, man. Play Undertale if you want to. I don't think you need to make Undertale political, though.
They believe firmly that if different communities, even huge number of, let's say, Muslim communities, and the original inhabitant, let's say, Christian communities are mixed up, the outcome of this will be good. There is no answer whether it will be good or bad, but I think it's very risky. And the chance that it will be not good, but it will be very bad is obvious. And each nation has the right to take this risk or to reject this risk. We Hungarians decided not to take that risk.
Again, your deportation of refugees to Serbia was illegal. The EU court ruled it illegal, and then you just ignored it. You did not have the right to just deport people to Serbia. You violated the law.
To mix up our society. That's the reason why they attack Hungary so harshly. And
you can't claim law and order and then violate the laws and disrupt the order.
That's the reason why my personal reputation is very bad. You know, I'm treated like the black sheep of the European Union personally, and sometimes Hungary as well, unfortunately.
So it has been 6 years since Germany, since Angela Merkel made the decision to let many hundreds of thousands of migrants into her country.
Millions, basically.
Millions, non-German speakers, mostly Muslim. What have the effects been in Germany?
You know, diplomacy is
requires
some bad behavior, but it was their decision. They took the risk, and now they.
Germany's fine. Viktor Orban's saying it this way because he has nothing bad to say about it. Germany's doing fine. Germany's fine. Germany's not on fire. Germany's not in chaos. It's fine.
And
I love how Tucker Carlson, the challenger, you know, he's the rebel, right? Tucker Carlson's the rebel who's going to give you the real facts that the mainstream media won't. as he says, broadcasting from Fox News. And then he gets in front of an actual dictator, like somebody who could actually be legitimately judged as a dictator. And he's the rebel. And he's basically playing footsies with them. We need a second camera under that table just to make sure they're not playing footsie. I just want you to notice that. That he will go so hard on the authoritarianism of Joe Biden, but then standing face to face with a legitimate, like a person trying to rule by decree and throwing people in prison for 5 years for being mean to him. And well, don't worry about it. You seem like a chill dude. Thanks for defending the West. Cowabunga.
Have deserve. That's their life. I would not like to make any categories to describe what was the outcome of their decision. I only insist on that the Hungarian...
Let's look at recorded criminal offenses in Germany. Can we just do that quick? Just to check it? Like I can keep saying that like Germany's fine, but let me see if I can just check the numbers on it quick. Or just send it in chat. I just want to check it out. That link didn't work. I have to check that out after.
Hungarians has the right to make our own choice.
You first became famous in the late 80s as a student, as one of the leaders against Soviet...
Did we ever follow up on that claim that the NSA was spying on him? No, it just happened and now it's gone forever, to never be mentioned again.
Occupation of Hungary, and you were a hero to many in the United States, and at the time, during the Cold War, we paid close attention to Hungary. I think the U.S. government was on your side, you were on the side of the U.S. government. So 30 years later, Joe Biden, while running for president last year on ABC News, suggested that you were, and I'm quoting, a totalitarian thug.
You see what's happening, everything from Belarus to Poland to Hungary, and the rise of totalitarian regimes in the world, and as well as this president embraces all the thugs in the world.
Is that bewildering for you to see the change, and how do you respond to that?
You're not going to ask him about Viktor Orban's policies that made Joe Biden call him an authoritarian thug. You're not going to ask him about the law that spreading falsehoods could give you 5 years in prison. You're not going to ask about the fact that Viktor Orban can practically rule by decree. You're not going to talk about the new anti-gay propaganda laws, which further stifle speech, but specifically stifling the speech of an oppressed minority in Hungary. Are we not going to talk about the fact he put migrants in fucking shipping containers? I know you talked so much about how terrible coyotes were for migrants coming across the southern border and the trafficking there. He literally put them in shipping containers and then illegally deported them to Serbia. EU court finds that it was illegal. Just ignores the courts. Just ignores them. Not going to question any of that when Joe Biden throws that accusation. You're just going to pretend that Joe Biden is bucking years of American political tradition and being friendly with Hungary and is just being mean to Hungary because Hungary won't fall in line behind the SJW cucks, right? Not going to ask him a single difficult question. Just one hard question, please.
Characterization.
So first of all, the reaction of that kind of opinion here in Hungary is always not very polite, but we think, who is that guy to say that? Then we say, okay, he is the president of the United States, so we should take it seriously. But anyway, somebody who does not speak our language has a...
Oh, I didn't know that when I'm being detained for saying an untruth about Hungary for 5 years, that I need to hear it in Hungarian to understand that it's dictatorial in nature. See, this is just, by the way, this is like when the neo-Nazis who deny the Holocaust come up and say, well, did you read the original German source documents in German? Huh? Or you'll hear the same thing about the Uyghurs. Well, did you read all the original Chinese documents in Chinese? You don't need to actually know the language to understand that what he's doing, throwing people in prison for 5 years for calling him a dictator or any other number of things, just being mean towards him, is not a very liberal thing to do. In fact, he has openly admitted at being illiberal, that he is not a liberal person. He is illiberal. He's openly admitted it. Ruling by decree You don't need to be Hungarian to understand that ruling by decree is an authoritarian thing to do. You don't need to be a Hungarian to understand that controlling 90% of the nation's press outlets is something an authoritarian would do. You don't need to be Hungarian to understand that targeting your political opponent's finances is something an authoritarian would do. There's no communication barrier here.
Very limited knowledge on Hungary, even in the recent several decades of our life. Don't understanding us, obviously.
Oh, somebody also brought up in chat. I'm Lebanese. We have 1 million of the Syrian refugees, 25% of the population. Europe makes me laugh when they complain about migrants. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of people say, well, if this was true, that these migrants should just be going to Lebanon. They should just be going to Turkey. They should just be going to Iraq. Why are they coming all the way to poor little Hungary and Poland and Germany? The thing is, they did go to Turkey. They did go to Lebanon. They did go to Iraq. They did go to these other countries. Turkey has millions of refugees within its borders. But countries can only take in so many refugees. What you're asking is for 3 countries to basically take in a huge chunk of another nation's population completely on their own. And of course, as more and more refugees pour into these smaller countries which don't have the finances to support them, you know what happens? The condition that these refugees are in get worse and worse and worse as they're strained of resources. So yes, they actually do go to these countries first. And then you know what happens? They find out that they're at their limits and they keep going. Because either the Hungarian militia or militaries will stop them at the border. The Turks will keep them going. Well, Lebanon will say there's too many, we can't take anymore. So the migrants keep going until they can get to a nation where they're safe and can live in for the time being. It's not nearly as simple as people try to make it out, as these migrants just decided of their own free will to walk thousands of miles to just hang out in Germany.
Having an opinion like that, it's by itself, it's a personal insult for all the Hungarians. But because he is the president of the United States, we have to be very modest. We have to be very respectful, and we have to make a lot of things to clarify that what he is doing is rather a fake. We try to do that in a polite way because we respect the Americans. We respect the American democracy, American culture. So we would not like to destroy our relationship because the bilateral relationship with the Americans is basically very good. We are cooperating well on the field of defense as NATO allies. Economic cooperation is excellent. You are a big investor here. Trade is going very well. Your businessman is finding a lot of possibilities here. So everything is fine, except the politics when the liberals are in government in Washington. That's the problem. So we have to manage that because the American-Hungarian good relationship is a value.
Can I just be clear that I'm looking through the data that's being sent to me, and there was not a crime rise in Germany due to the migrants. And immigrants in Germany did not cause a crime rise, a raise in crime in any sort. Looking at it right now. I'm trying to get the links to work for stream. They're not, but they're already in chat if you guys want to look at them.
Even if the Americans don't perceive today it as it was previously. So we have to save what we can save out of it.
But it's a little strange. I don't think Joe Biden has ever referred to Xi Jinping, for example, who has murdered many of his political opponents famously, as a totalitarian thug. Why would...
I don't think that's true. Can we look this up actually quick? Let me look this up quick.
Same.
Actually, wait, can we? Holy shit, this moron. How did he say literally the one thing that Joe Biden actually called Xi Jinping? This moron. Listen to this again.
I don't think Joe Biden has ever referred to Xi Jinping, for example, who has murdered many of his political opponents famously, as a totalitarian thug.
Same question to you. Would you allow Chinese firms to build critical U.S. infrastructure?
No, I would not. And I spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader had by the time we left office. This is a guy who doesn't have a democratic with a small d bone in his body. This is a guy who is a thug who, in fact, has 1 million Uyghurs in reconstruction camps, meaning concentration camps. This is the guy who you see what's happening right now.
What do you mean, Tucker?
In Hong Kong.
Tucker!
And this is a guy who I was able.
You literally said exactly what Joe Biden said to the T. Joe Biden didn't call Xi Jinping a thug. He literally called him a thug. He didn't only call him undemocratic. He literally called him word by word exactly what you said he didn't call him. He did. Right here. Can we actually have that go again? Can we play that again? Tucker, you moron.
I don't think Joe Biden has ever referred to Xi Jinping, for example, who has murdered many of his political opponents famously, as a totalitarian thug.
To build critical U.S. infrastructure.
No, I would not. And I spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader had by the time we left office. This is a guy who doesn't have a democratic with a small d bone in his body. This is a guy who is a thug who, in fact, has 1 million Uyghurs in reconstruction camps, meaning concentration camps. This is the guy who you see what's happening right now in Hong Kong. And this is a guy who I was able to convince should join the international agreement at the Paris Agreement, because guess what? They need to be involved.
Tucker Carlson, the fact that he is a respected journalist, when slip-ups like this happen all the time on his show, absolutely baffles me.
Why would he single you out? And not just you, by the way, the Polish government as well.
The problem is the success. So it's a real challenge for the liberal thinkers that what is going on in Central Europe, Poland and in Hungary as well. In Hungary, more outspoken probably. We are speaking probably too much anyway on our intentions. So what is going on here is building up a society which is very successful. Economically, politically, culturally, even in demography, we have some success, family policy. So what you can see here could be described as a success story. But the fundamentals of this success are totally different than it is wished and run and created by many other Western countries. So the Western liberals cannot accept that inside the Western civilization there is a conservative national alternative which is more successful at the everyday life, at the level of than the liberal ones. That's the reason why they criticize us. They are fighting for themselves, not against us. But we are an example that somebody or a country which is based on traditional values, on national identity, based on tradition of Christianity, could be successful or sometimes even more successful than a leftist liberal government.
Let's be clear. He is trying to talk about how successful Hungary is. Well, Germany's doing fine after taking in all these migrants, and Viktor Orban had to violate EU law to deport them because he thought a few thousand migrants could collapse his whole state. If your country is so weak that the injection of a few thousand migrants is so terrifying because you think it'll be a Trojan horse that collapses your country from the inside, then it doesn't sound like you have a stable country, economy, or government. If you're so fearful that just something so small can completely crumble everything you've built, then it doesn't sound like you have a successful government at all.
Interesting as an American to see this. So the American media, the Biden administration, the State Department.
By the way, we can just compare the standing of living of Hungarians and the Western European countries that he is condemning, and Hungary does not beat them. Let me just be very clear.
Is opposed to you because they say that you're a totalitarian thug. Your opponents are a coalition of former communists and anti-Semites. Is it strange to see the American left?
It's so weird that Tucker Carlson cares about bigotry, but he's not going to bring up Viktor Orban's anti-gay propaganda laws. He's not going to bring up how he's referred to migrants as just Trojan horses for terrorism. He's not going to bring up his party's extremely inflammatory rhetoric about minority groups in Hungary, and specifically about migrants. You're not going to bring up how he violated EU law deporting migrants and refugees to Serbia. He's not going to bring up any of this. He's not going to bring up any of the violations of people's free speech by arresting them for calling him a dictator. Anything. None of that needs to be brought up because Tucker Carlson cares about bigotry.
Left rooting for a coalition that includes anti-Semites.
Yeah, let's say if you would have asked me several years ago whether could it happen that the ex-communist political forces and the anti-Semite right is forming a coalition and running together at the election against a pro-Israeli and pro-American.
Can I just be clear? Viktor Orban, like I've said a million times, he is strangling the finances of his political opponents. He's seizing them. He is taking over all of the free press in Hungary. He controls 90% of it. Going after journalists. He's labeled as a press freedom predator. And this is the comment that Tucker Carlson wants to bring up when it comes to the Hungarian elections? Tucker Carlson is using Viktor Orban as a introductory crash course to fascism. And I do mean that. The fact that this is the interview he's doing when he's standing across from one of the world's #1 human rights offenders, somebody actively consolidating control over his entire country, and this is the interview he wants to do, this is nothing but him using Viktor Orban to do a crash course on fascism to his audience.
Pro-NATO.
Also, somebody brought this up. Why is Tucker not wearing socks? Look at his shoes. Why is he not wearing socks? Oh, also, somebody brought it up in chat. It is a good thing to mention. Tucker Carlson really cares about anti-Semitism. He really cares. But he's not going to bring up Viktor Orban's history with anti-Semitism. The Hungarian leader will insist that he's the best friend of Hungarian Jews. He's anything but. Not long ago, at an event dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism in the European Parliament, the Hungarian state secretary defended his boss by telling me how Orban's party is funding an institute to research anti-Semitism and combat anti-Israel sentiments. He argued, truthfully from what I've heard, that Orban is not personally hostile to Jews and pointed to Budapest's close relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I would also make an argument that Benjamin Netanyahu is an authoritarian, but whatever. What about the attacks against billionaire Jewish philanthropist George Soros? If you don't know about this, and this is something that made Viktor Orban the darling of the far right, is that Viktor Orban has constantly and consistently brought up George Soros. And his argument is that George Soros is working with a cabal to undermine his government. Do any of us recognize that rhetoric and what's going on there? That George Soros, in particular, only brought up by certain individuals, is trying to undermine his government? In the 2017 parliamentary election, Orban promoted anti-Semitic imagery of powerful Jewish financiers scheming to control the world. Thousands of posters of grinning Soros slogans with "Let's not allow Soros to have the last laugh" were posted around the countries on billboards, on the metro, and on the floors of Budapest's trams. Just this year, a new media campaign featured Soros and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker with the caption, "You also have the right to know what Brussels is preparing for." After Orban came to power in 2010, he appointed Andras Levit-Gal to direct the Holocaust Memorial and Documentation Center in Budapest. According to Paul Shapiro of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, Gal's first proposal was to eliminate the mention of wartime Hungarian leader Horthy's alliance with Adolf Hitler and participation in dismemberment of 3 neighboring states, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia, as irrelevant to the Holocaust. Not only is Viktor Orban anti-Semitic, even if he isn't personally anti-Semitic, as in his politics is anti-Semitic, he has promoted the Soros financier is going to undermine his government and has done Holocaust revisionism through his appointments. So it's very strange to me. Oh yeah, Horthy is pronounced Horty. I'm not good with Hungarian names. So what I'm getting at with Orban here is it's really strange that Viktor Orban here gets to have this interview, and Tucker Carlson is very concerned about anti-Semitism. Very concerned. Very concerned. Not concerned about any of the authoritarian tendencies of Orban, and very concerned about anti-Semitism, but is not going to bring up any of the anti-Semitic incidents done in Viktor Orban's party, the appointments Viktor Orban has made to Holocaust remembrance, or his comments about George Soros and the financiers. I just find that strange is all.
Western-oriented government as we are, my answer would have been no, it's impossible. But now the international communities accept it. So I understand that here in Hungary, the political parties would like to get the power as soon as they can. Therefore, they try to make a broad coalition against the ruling government. Okay. But to be accepted that, by the international community so easily, I'm surprised. Especially the behavior in America is totally new experience for me.
It does seem like Hungary is moving in a completely different direction from the rest of the continent, from the rest of the Western world. I mean, do you think that 20 years from now, that will be an unbridgeable divide? I mean, where does that lead?
Let's describe how I see it. What I see that in the Central European countries, the countries suffered the most because of the Soviet occupation and communist dictatorship. So in these countries, my approach, or the Hungarian approach, is very popular. Probably we have a majority in all of that societies, not only in Poland and Hungary. They are more moderate. I mean, the others are more moderate. But if you understand what they are doing, what are the fundamentals and their motivations, is basically belonging to the same political family anyway.
Yes.
On the Western society, there is a lot of people, millions and millions of people, who disagree the direction of the policy taken at this moment, which is against the family or not respecting the families, which is more based on migration.
It's so weird to hear Viktor Orban say that they learned the lesson of the Soviet Union and that's why they're not acting like the West, while he actively implements policies that consolidate power around himself, showing to everyone he didn't learn a damn thing about the history of the Soviet Union in Hungary as he's perpetuating and continuing authoritarian tendencies in the nation.
Society which is more welfare and so on and so on. So I don't say that the political competition is over in the Western European societies. So I see chances, and the key country is Italy at this moment, where the fight and the competition is very open. So I can see chances in the Western countries also that they are able to change their policy from liberal to conservative, or from liberal leftist to Christian Democrats. The chance is there.
Let me be clear, when he says liberal, he doesn't mean it in the way that you and I think of it in America. When in America, due to like Rush Limbaugh and a lot of people, the word liberal used to just mean like, you like democracy and you like free speech and you like it like that. But then we've slowly turned it into like liberal means that you're a left-winger and conservative means you're a right-winger. And that's what it means in the American dialect now. But when he says, and he said it openly, he is illiberal, what he means is he doesn't appreciate democratic institutions. He doesn't appreciate freedom of press. He doesn't appreciate freedom of speech. And for Tucker Carlson, the supposed free speech warrior, to be giving this much of a softball interview to this fucking dunderhead is appalling. And I'm just sitting here baffled as somebody who's supposed to be challenging authority actively submits to authority.
But we are not internationally well organized. So the forthcoming years are really exciting.
I've noticed in the last few nights in Budapest, I've run into a number of Americans who have come here because they want to be around people who agree with them, who agree with you. Do you see Budapest as a kind of capital of this kind of thinking?
The capital of that kind of thinking, or one of the capitals, because the other...
I'm worried that Ukraine is like a mecca for white nationalists. And what I mean by that is far-right terroristic white nationalists will go to Ukraine to fight in the war, then come back and bring that training back to the United States. A lot of unclassified domestic terror reports have shown this again and again and again. I don't want, and it seems to be becoming the case, and I think this Tucker Carlson interview kind of solidifies that, Hungary to be the mecca for right-wing political commentators, influencers, stuff, that they will go there, learn about Orbanomics, learn about his terrible, terrible authoritarian tendencies, and then bring them home. Like, maybe you should arrest people for speaking untruths. Maybe you should rule by decree. Maybe we should consolidate 90% of media around Viktor Orban. Maybe we should violate laws on refugees and just deport them to random countries and just ignore the law when we're told we're violating the law while simultaneously claiming to be the party of law and order. I'm scared because I think this Tucker Carlson interview really is like the final nail in the coffin, in that Hungary now is going to be the mecca for these right-wingers. And you watch in the future, interviews like this might continue. And I'm betting, I'll bet you all like $20 that going forward, we're going to see more right-wing commentators like Tucker Carlson going over to Hungary and Poland. Somebody brought up Poland in chat, and Poland, and promoting these two societies as what America should act like. By the way, Poland's has been pushing for a while to enact basically an abortion ban. Something that would be needed in the United States. We need to overturn Roe versus Wade to enact the type of abortion restriction laws they're enacting in Poland right now to control women's bodies. So they're not exactly, even though I would say even they're more moderate than Viktor Orban, they're going on the extremes as well.
The Central European countries are also very competitive and producing very nice ideas and organizing that kind of communities of conservative and Christian Democrats thinkers as we do. We cooperate with that countries, so that kind of networks are getting closer to each other. It's getting more and more a real Central European network. But not only thinkers, ordinary citizens, average citizens are moving to Central European countries. It's not too dynamic at this moment. But
can I just be clear that there was a lot more Polish people working in Great Britain than there were Great Britons working in Poland when the UK left the European Union. Just want to throw that out there. Now, when it comes to Southern European countries, their workers are going outside of the country to work before coming back. Every time I go to Ocean City, if you notice and look around Ocean City as a Marylander, you'll know exactly what I'm saying. A lot of the people who work there as like carnies, like doing like the games and the restaurants and stuff like that, like at least half of them are actually like Southern European. Romania, Kosovo, Hungary, Serbia, Bosnia, Greece, Macedonia, all these countries. And a lot of that is because, again, these countries have a lot of workers going outside, not only into Europe, but into the States as well.
But the signs are clear. Many Christian families and conservative families who think that Western Europe is not secure enough, the future is unstable.
North Macedonia, don't want to piss off the Greeks.
The public security is not provided, and the ideological direction of the countries, or the basic values of the countries built on, is changing not to their taste or their intention. They are looking for other places. So if you go to the Hungarian countryside, you can find West European families who move to Hungary. First to have the second house, because inside European Union we have a free movement. So first to have second house and then spending more and more time here. So we can't exclude the future of the...
I gotta say, it's really concerning for me to see so many conservatives that were so angry about a lot of the laws that were being passed in Hong Kong, that I was also angry about all these laws being enacted in Hong Kong to restrict the people's freedoms, then turn around and just be like, "Yas, Queen!" when they see this guy come out. the conservatives come out and say, no, this guy's based, though. We care about free speech in Hong Kong. Hungary, though, that's based in red pill. Don't worry about it.
The European history when there will be a new migration from west to the east.
Within Europe.
The Christians and the conservatives try to find a better home. We can't exclude that.
So up until very recently, Hungary, which is a small nation, 10 million people, had two big nuclear-armed allies, the United States and Israel. You were probably Netanyahu's closest ally in Europe. You were close to Donald Trump. Both of them are gone. Where does that leave you?
We are not very much fortunate in the recent years, because Donald Trump was a great friend of Hungary. He was very much supportive to us, not just personally, but politically also. So there was a good friendship between the two countries also. And, first America first, is a very positive message here in Central Europe. Because it means if for Donald Trump, America first, for us.
Ask a Bosnian that question, or ask an Albanian that question, or ask anybody from Kosovo that question, if they would have preferred America first during the 1990s. Ask any Albanian if they would have preferred America first in the late 1990s.
Hungary could be first as well. And let's cooperate on that basis.
Right.
So that was a very good foreign policy, very effective, and we cooperated very well. The same with Bibi, with Netanyahu, who was a good friend of the Hungarians, and when he was in power, he always invested a lot of energy to have a good relation with the Central European countries. We respect it very much. But he lost also. So the Hungarian conservative Christian, Judeo-Christian democratic thinking lost to major international supporter, and the opponents came into power. So this is a totally new circumstance around Hungary. For me as a politician, it's a strong challenge, how to handle it.
You've got an election coming up in April. Are you worried that there will be international interference in your election in Hungary?
Are you kidding me? What does that mean? What do you think, Tucker? Now you care? Tucker Carlson now cares about other countries interfering in elections? Where was this concern with the Internet Research Agency in Russia? But now you have that concern for a country you don't even live in? Dude, come on, man. Get off your knees and stop blowing him. This is the guy who just every year just says George Soros is trying to undermine our country. Please vote for me. Go Orban. That's what Orban does.
That will happen. We are not worried of that. We are prepared for that. Obviously, the international left will do everything what they can do, probably even more.
Tucker, or you can even ask what he means by that. What do you mean by international left? What are they gonna do? Just no follow-up questions. Just let him say whatever. He's a dude actively strangling his country's democracy. Tucker Carlson's under the table jerking him off at this point.
To change the government here in Hungary. We are aware of that, and we are prepared for that, how to take the fight and fight back.
When the President of the United States describes you as a totalitarian thug, which is a very serious thing to say about somebody, I would note. I mean, that suggests that, why wouldn't the Biden State Department work to prevent you from being...
Don't suggest that. Don't suggest that. You have no clue. There's no evidence that the State Department in any way are operating to overturn Hungarian elections. You can't just say that without proof. Like, well, let me just speculate. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Let me just plant these seeds with no outside evidence.
Reelected.
And he is an authoritarian thug, Tucker. Again, the anti-gay propaganda bill. Oh, you called Orban a dictator? Better come down to the local police station. Maybe give you 5 years. Just violate EU laws on refugees willy-nilly. Who cares? Just deport them all to Serbia. Let's put the migrants in shipping containers because they're a Trojan horse. But don't worry. You need to be with me because George Soros is going to overturn our elections. And let's forget what Hungary did during the Holocaust and how our leadership assisted Hitler. Let's erase that from the history books. And by the way, I'm going to rule by decree, and I now own 90% of the nation's media. and I'm going to strangle my political opponent's finances. Wait, you called me a thug? Well, that seems out of line. What's with the selective outrage?
I think sooner or later the Americans will realize that issues in Hungary must be decided by the Hungarians. And it's better even for the leftist liberal government in the United States to have a good partner, which is a conservative Christian democratic, supported long-term by the people.
To be clear, Viktor Orban is openly illiberal. He has said he's illiberal, not in the way that, he doesn't like left-wing values, but in the way that he doesn't respect democracy. He pretends to.
Hungarian people. It's better to have that than a government which is supported by America and take the position but losing after several months and creating destabilization and uncertainty. So not loved but stable partner is better than the uncertain you.
He says his country's stable, but he believed a few thousand migrants would collapse his whole country as a Trojan horse. Doesn't sound stable to me.
That I hope the Americans will understand it.
No wonder they don't want you to hear what he says.
Tucker! That wasn't an interview. I felt like that should have been uploaded on Pornhub under the Hungarian section, man.
You don't have to watch your country collapse. You don't have to have leaders who hate the population or divide their own people against each other, who make the country worse.
Oh yeah, and who's they, Tucker? After talking to Viktor Orban, the guy who claims Soros is behind everything, I think you using the word they, after claiming how bad anti-Semitism is. Little interesting.
Who open the borders, who...
For claiming, you care so much about anti-Semitism. Oh, yes.
Increase crime, who encourage people to live on the sidewalk and do drugs.
Hungarians are watching their country fall apart when it comes to their institutions. Poland, don't even get me started on Poland. My God.
If there's any lesson of talking to Viktor Orban, maybe it's that. The conversation went on for quite some time. One thing we learned, man, are the efforts to unseat him intense and stealthy. We'll have a lot more on that.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, Tucker. Tucker is doing no more than making propaganda for fascists while not questioning their institutional power as they strangle their own countries. This is really gross, and in my opinion, is actually the worst thing Tucker Carlson has done. This is the worst thing, and it really disgusts me. Besides, of course, that one time he said that all Iraqis are like uncivilized and they don't use forks and such. Ooh. Okay. Let's go to the next story. And Tucker will love it because it's about China. China is going to bar songs with illegal content from karaoke venues. What is illegal content in a karaoke song? So I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to a karaoke place, but I've never been like scrolling through the songs at a karaoke place and one of them's like, here's where you pick up the heroin. Like that's not what happens at karaoke bars. So I'm very curious, what exactly is the illegal content at these karaoke bars? China will establish a blacklist of karaoke songs to ban those containing illegal content at karaoke venues across the country starting from October 1st, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism has said. Such content includes that which endangers national unity. Well, isn't that lovingly vague? Sovereignty or territorial integrity, violates state religious policies by propagating cults or superstitions, or which encourages illegal activities such as gambling and drugs, the ministry said on its website on Tuesday. Okay, let's go through all of these quick. Endangers national unity. So what could that be? Stuff condemning the government, stuff criticizing the government, whatever could make us not feel united, so to speak. Sovereignty or territorial integrity, that has to do with Taiwan or the South China Sea or, say, Tibet or, God, why does it keep making me wait? Tibet or any of these countries. Tibet or Xinjiang or anything like that. If you question whether Taiwan's a part of China in a song, I don't know why anybody would make a song about that. Better take that off. violate states' religious policies by propagating cults or superstitions. Obviously, that has to do with the oppressive nature towards religion, or which encourages illegal activities such as gambling and drugs. So this has to do with rap songs that are like, talking about popping drugs, weed. God, why does it keep popping up? Weed or anything like that. So a decent amount of rap just gone. And basically anything that promotes gambling. So I guess you gotta know when to hold 'em. Know when to fold 'em. That's banned in China now. I'm sorry. You gotta get that out of there. That's too much for the people to handle. Content providers such as karaoke venues will be responsible for auditing the songs, it said, adding that China has nearly 50,000 entertainment outlets with a basic music library of over 100,000 songs, making it difficult for the venue operators to identify illegal tracks. The ministry said it encouraged content providers to supply healthy and uplifting music. Yeah, no songs like Hold 'em or Fold 'em or songs about Percocets. Music to these venues. China heavily regulates and scrubs content like violence, pornography, or politically sensitive commentary from social media and websites, and has in recent months punished live streaming to video platforms for hosting content it deems low taste. So no soda pop it in China. No Destiny in China. Destiny's content is banned in China. So I think I found a place for Bad Bunny and Mike to move to. Yeah, no hot tub streamers.